Good evening and welcome to this ArtsQuest at Home presentation of a movie talk featuring The Normal Heart. My name is Ryan Hill, Programming Director at ArtsQuest. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We are excited to talk about this film based on an incredibly important play done by Larry Kramer. But before we get to that, just a couple quick things. First off, we do recommend that you watch this particular presentation in speaker view, which you can toggle to the top right of your screen. Also, we thank BSI Corporate Benefits for their sponsorship of the ArtsQuest at Home programming, allowing us to keep doing what we love to do best, which is providing access to the arts of the Lehigh Valley and beyond. And we will do that through any situation as long as we can. We also thank those of you who use the pay what you will option on this free event, as every dollar helps us make sure that we can open safely and make sure that we can stick around for whenever we are able to fully reopen, whenever that may be. So thank you all again so much for being here. Right now, I want to basically get you over to your program. The woman who proposed this to us is one of our cinema committee members. She's been on our cinema committee for quite some time now and has been doing such fantastic work for us, and we can't thank her enough. So please welcome everybody, Catherine Ford.
Hi everybody, glad you can join us. I also want to let you know that tonight I'm very fortunate to have along with me to discuss and share some information about such a great film by such a wonderful writer, activist, Larry Kramer, is Dr. Clay Gish. Clay is a renowned person in the field of history. She was in New York during that time, and I know she's going to bring quite a bit of information and insight to give even more of a perspective that we may not have just by going through some of the information on the movie. So Clay, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Ryan, you can bring up the first slide to the presentation.
All right, doing that right now.
Okay, great. So we'll get started right now. So before we even get to the play and the movie, we just got to give some background information on Larry Kramer, the writer and of the play, and eventually one of the most important activists in our time when it comes to gay rights and defeating AIDS. Larry Kramer actually attended Yale, and at that time in his life thought he was the only person that was gay and that were attracted to other males. He did attempt suicide while there. He had a tough childhood growing up, and he was rejected by his father. It was tough for both him and his brother, and you hear that discussion quite a bit in the movie. But he actually was nominated for The Woman in Love. It was D.H. Lawrence's book that was made into a film, and he did the screenwriting, was nominated for Best Screenwriter Academy Award for that. He also, after the 1970s and post-Stonewall, wrote a novel called Faggots. And it really was provocative. He right away got a reputation of being loud and telling it like it is. And although this was considered a novel, many of the characters and the people in it were of his circle. And they really weren't too pleased that he did this, but he did. And if you see the picture of him in the middle where it says the definition of gay should not just be sexual, that really was at the heart of who he was. So he had both aspects to this passion, and sometimes was out of step with his friends at the time and people in his circle. He got a lot of press for an article he wrote in the New York Native called 1112 and Counting. And it was really a battle cry for the men at the time to take look and take notice and pause what they were doing because of the virus that was beginning to really decimate the community. So that really got him off and running when it came to this virus and what to do about it. I mean, his thought was that we weren't he wasn't asking anyone to give up sex, but just cool it for a while. However, he said in an interview I saw that he became a piranha in the community. And many times folks who saw him on the street would cross the street just so they didn't have to say hello to him. But looking back, many of them now say, you know, he was right. But let's get to the reason why we're here tonight, and that's to talk about the normal heart. Next slide, Ryan. So The Normal Heart is largely autobiographical play by Larry Kramer. It focuses on the rise of HIV/AIDS crisis in New York City between 1981 and 1984, as seen through the eyes of the writer-activist Ned Weeks, the gay founder of the prominent HIV advocacy group. So it was a play that came out in 1985, and it was off Broadway. Eventually, it ran its course, and then had a revival in 2011 on Broadway. In the meantime, between 1985 and 2011, Kramer also wrote The Destiny of Me, which was kind of the second phase or the next storyline from The Normal Heart. But once he got the revival, it really took off. And I think, Clay, you were telling me you did try to go and see these plays, but could not. What was the word on the street about the play when it first came out that you recall, and Larry Kramer in general at that time?
When it first came out, everybody I knew was going to see it. And I, for one reason or another, I never got to. I wanted to, and something always came up. I heard less about it in 2011. I mean, it was, even though it was on Broadway, but when it was off Broadway, everybody I knew except me saw it. And I was really sad about it. And so I was happy that I finally got to see the movie at least.
Right, right. And, you know, talking about the revival on Broadway, it did very well. It won Best Revival Tony Award. It gave Ellen Barkin was her premiere as the doctor, and she also won Best Actress in a Play. John Benjamin Hickey won for portraying Felix. And, you know, there was a lot of hype, I guess, at that point with this play. And in 1985, Barbra Streisand actually bought the rights to it, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But, you know, it really was, I guess, that first off-Broadway play was just such an impact, because it was still at the beginning, like the play was going on, but it was still at the beginning of this disease and this crisis for the community.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it happened at a point when AIDS was just beginning to make the national headlines. I mean, Rock Hudson died that year, and it was a very different kind of prominence that it had on the world stage that it had before. Before, it was just this vile gay disease, and I mean, that's part of the frustration that Ned Weeks goes through and trying to get people to pay attention. Whereas by 85, they were paying attention.
What was kind of interesting too, I came to understand that during the 2011 Broadway premiere, when the audience was exiting, Larry Kramer actually had a flyer made that he would hand out to each person who was leaving to explain to them that the events and the characters in this play were based on real events, on people, and that this was not just, you know, an exaggeration of what was going on, but really reflecting what was going on. Talking about the gay men's health crisis. Dr. Lobenstein, who's actually Dr. Bruckner in the movie and in the play. And gets into all of those things, but he gave out at the premiere, and from time to time would hand out these flyers to people, because a lot of people would say they left the play or even watched the movie and they were brought to tears, but he also wanted them to go out and do something, to become involved and to take up the mantle. Ryan, if you could go to the next slide. So real quickly, I don't know if the people that you may have known who went to see this play, but this is part of the scenery in the play. And it just was to really drive home the point of these men were dying, people were dying. So it's the names of people who have died in blue on a black backdrop. And then you see there's a few men in the room leaning against the wall to just drive that point home. And it was very impactful. And I know watching the movie how I felt, but being in the audience at the play must have been really something. So really amazing to see that scene right there. Ryan, you can move on to next slide. So as I mentioned, Barbra Streisand, when she went and seen the 1985 off-Broadway play of The Normal Heart, she reached out to Larry Kramer and said, I want to bring this to the screen. And when she meant the screen, she meant, out to the movie theaters across the country. And, there's even this quote I have up there that she said, after seeing that, how could you not support these men to be together? And it really, really got to her deeply. So when she started to try to put this together, there were some roadblocks. She tried very hard to get someone to produce it with her at that time. And it was a struggle. And she along with John Schlesinger, Kenneth Branagh, Ralph Fiennes, a lot of prominent people just couldn't get this off the ground. And many believe that was because Hollywood wasn't ready to bring such a powerful storyline to the big screen. Time went on, struggle after struggle, and then she decided, well, I can't get support to bring it on a major, production to go out into the theater. I'll make it made for television movie instead. So she starts to do that and work with HBO and others, and it still doesn't work out. By 1996, it's still a struggle. And now Larry Kramer is getting very upset with Barbra Streisand and starts to believe that she's not really interested. He says in an interview that he shared with her a book of pictures of men having sex, and she didn't seem to care for it. So he took that as she wasn't really interested in doing this movie with him. So by I don't know if it was 2007 or 05, needless to say, the chances of her doing this runs out and she cannot do it. However, in the meantime, she's still trying. And on April 18th, even in 1993, she organizes a benefit reading for Broadway Cares at the Roundabout Theater, where she does actually, have a reading of the play to try to keep it in the, the mainstream, but with no luck. So, but if anyone really wants to see this back and forth, just get the Hollywood Report online, and you can see a lot more about this. Next slide. So it's a 30-year journey from Barbra Streisand to Ryan Murphy. Okay, and he picks it up in 2009. What was going on then? Ryan Murphy, he had the story Glee, the television series Glee and The New Normal. He was getting more involved with gay themes, LGBTQ themes. So he convinced Larry Kramer to give him a shot at doing this. And Larry Kramer said, okay, fine. And he committed that he would have a great cast, which he winds up having with Mark Ruffalo, Matt Bomer, Taylor Kish, Jim Parsons, Alfred Molina, Julia Roberts, and it comes together. But it was a really long, dreaded time between 95 and when it came out in 2014. Clay, did you hear any rumblings about it trying to become a movie and challenges from getting it from the play to the movie theaters?
I hadn't heard all of that, but I was surprised that it was, when it came out in 2014. I mean, think about like Angels in America had already been on Broadway as well, and that also dealt with AIDS differently.
Right.
But it was, and then it also had a made-for-TV season. And I'm going to say this, that Broadway and New York is one thing. I think they've always been far more liberal than Hollywood. Hollywood has, for all we think about it being, artsy, it's not. It's a very conservative place, and it always has been. Even when you think back to like the Children's Hour, it was on Broadway, a lesbian. Lillian Hellman had. That was on Broadway. But when they made it into a movie, they changed it to a heterosexual triangle.
Right.
And it's vastly different. So it's, I think it's not surprising that Broadway, off-Broadway, and then Broadway embraced The Normal Heart and Angels in America far sooner than Hollywood did. And even Angels in America, it was made into a TV movie, not a big release movie. So it's, I think probably Philadelphia was the first one I know that was a big Hollywood movie, and Tom Hanks in it, everybody's good neighbor, basically. And I think that helped, that perhaps his lighter touch was able to get that made.
Right. And the thing about the movie from Larry Kramer and his screenplay, he was not going to, taper it down,
Exactly.
with what he wanted to show and right in your face challenges that he saw and what went on. So that's a good point. I mean, 1985 is when the play's made. She tries to get it put out, and Barbra Streisand isn't, a small producer, actor, director, but still had
Right, but she's got her own problems with Hollywood. I mean, she's known as a strident, strong woman, and I mean, even when she did great directorial work, they snubbed her.
That's
They
true.
didn't even nominate her, though her film was nominated.
Interesting.
So it's, Hollywood is like that.
Well, what was interesting when Ryan Murphy was asked about this goings on with Larry and Barbara, basically what he said is that's Larry and Barbara's thing. But to him, there's no denying her passion for the material, that the public readings she did and her talking about it all these years kept it in the forefront. And for that, I think she should be commended.
Yes.
I've never said it before in public, but I'm very thankful for what she kept it afloat and the idea of alive. So he was very appreciative of that. And I think that was reputable of him to say. So, So, but finally it's going to be getting made. So Ryan, next slide. So we have The Normal Heart. And for Ryan Murphy, the director, he said it's just really a passion project at this time. When he met with Larry Kramer, he bought the rights to the project. It was 2010 from 1985. He did get Ruffalo to come on and not only star, but partner on the project. He is credited as a co-producer as well. And together they finally got Julia Roberts to come in, and they worked, and he worked very closely with Kramer on the script. And they did a considerable amount of changing. In his mind, says Ryan Murphy, it really was a movie about prejudice and civil rights. And he really wanted young people to see it because, you know, when you look at it, you think this is a drama, but it's actually being, you know, exaggerated. And if anything, it probably wasn't as real as it possibly could be. He took it serious because it was about Larry Kramer's life. And he did, though, the original script was about 200 pages originally, and they got it down to about 98, so a little over 100. And he did say they broke out 40 to 45% new material. So it is much different from the play in many aspects. And although much of the reviews have been positive, any criticism is about not reflecting the play as much as, you know, that particular viewer would have liked to see. But that really was all that there was as far as any kind of criticism. So you have Mark Ruffalo as Ned Weeks, and basically the alter ego of Larry Kramer. And Larry Kramer was talking about that on the set one time and said that he was actually very embarrassed because he never saw himself as very attractive. And here he has, you know, Mark Ruffalo playing him, who is this hunk. So he was very embarrassed about it. You can go to the next slide. So there's a strong cast, representative of various relationships of love, friendship, and anger. Clay, did anything about the movie or about these characters jump out at you as far as, you know, when you were in the streets of New York and you're at school or whatever activities you were doing? You had many male friends, I'm sure, too, that were dealing with these issues. Anything strike you as you were watching the movie with the characters?
They really reflected the kind of the span of reactions to this virus that I was aware of in those early days, like, you know, 81 to 86, where, but especially the early years, I thought they did that well in the movie, where people really didn't know what was going on. There was something horrible happening. Nobody understood why or what it was, and it was frightening, and everybody was frightened. Gay people were frightened, straight people were frightened. Everybody was just frightened because they didn't understand what it was or why it was happening. And then when it started becoming this more and more associated with gay men, then this horrific moralizing began. Mm-hmm. And I think that this film captures it so well. The story captures it, and but that schism between the approach to dealing with it, where there were some trying to pacify straight people, make it not so frightening, not so scary, not so gay. And then Ned Weeks, Mark Ruffalo's character, is just sheer anger that he could not control. Anger at the disease, at the people doing nothing about it, at the gays that were, the gay people who were preaching just chill, be cool about it. And he was just, I was so moved by that anger. That, to me, that is the heart of the film. His anger. Yeah. And that's what fueled the change that came. His anger.
It's so interesting you're talking about him and his character. He really played that role extraordinarily well. It was amazing. And if anyone has ever seen or watched Larry Kramer, I mean, he really does it justice, which is quite difficult. But what came out was that originally Ruffalo, who had a childhood friend who struggled with homosexuality, Ruffalo saw the Normal Heart play in 1986 because, you know, it traveled around the country. Right. Different folks put it on. But he did not think a straight person should have played this homosexual role, that a homosexual male actor should have. And he went back and forth with Ryan Murphy. And at the end, he conceded he would do it. And, you know, now that he made that performance, you can't imagine someone else doing that. And in fact, before Ruffalo, there was someone else they had in mind, and that was Alec Baldwin. And now that you've seen Ruffalo, and I think of Alec Baldwin, I can't imagine. But that, again, that was in 2014.
Right. Yeah.
The production, when you look at Felix's character, the love
right.
of his life from beginning, and then when he is struggling with the illness, production had to take breaks throughout the filming to allow some of the actors to change their physical appearances. For Matt Bomer, he needed to lose 40 pounds for his physique to display that he was dying of AIDS. And he said that the weight loss started to take such a toll on his health that by the time he was filming those last couple of scenes, the one where he's with Ned Week's brother and when he's in the hospital, that he actually did need help to get out of bed and to maneuver, because his body was feeling the effects of this severe loss. On a lighter note, though, when Julia Roberts, as the doctor, is first meeting and interviewing Ned, she asks him, all right, tell me some of the doctors you went and seen. And I don't know if everyone on the Movie Talk is going to know these names, but maybe you will, Clay. He refers to the doctors as Laverne, Patty, and Maxine. And these are the names of the Andrews sisters from
right, yeah.
the 40s or so. So he did throw that in, I guess, for some levity. You know, when you get to Julia Roberts' character, she is very, very powerful, obviously, and they become, you know, the dynamic duo. But Dr. Linda Lobenstein is actually the doctor that she's based off of, and she was in a wheelchair, and they really thought of her as a bright light in this darkness. So that was very important. But what a great cast. You had, of course, Ryan Murphy as the director, and Ruffalo and Julia Roberts, but then you also get Jim Parsons, who was in the play, who plays Tommy Boatwright wonderfully. You have Joe Mantillo, who actually played Ned Weeks in the play, but plays Mickey in this movie. And then Taylor Kish and Alfred Molina, who plays his brother. And I thought the brother relationship was quite remarkable as well. You know, so the director of photography is actually Daniel Moder, M-O-D-E-R, and he is actually married to Julia Roberts. So he was on set. One final upbeat thing that happened during the filming of this, on the day they do the fundraising scene, that's when they're out at the club raising money for the gay men's health crisis. It was actually getting filmed on June 26, 2013. And Larry Kramer was fighting some health issues, but he was in attendance at this filming of this scene at the nightclub. That was the day that DOMA was overturned. The Defense of Marriage Act was overturned. And, you know, that was a momentous event. And Larry Kramer got up on stage and just screamed, "We did it." So when you think of that visual of 1985 and talking about this and putting this play together and now getting it made, but then on that day, the Defense of Marriage Act is overturned. What a, you know, as a historian, what a historical chain of events, you think?
It really is. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had a friend, Tony. I lost quite a few friends to AIDS, but Tony, he was somebody I was very close to, and he died quite a bit later than some of my other friends. Many died during the 80s, but this was about 2000 when Tony died. And there were so many changes that had happened. And I was talking to him on the phone, and he said, wow, we really accomplished a lot, didn't we? We made a difference. And yeah, we did. And, and just this year, I mean, just this past week,
Right.
the Supreme Court we've had another victory. And
Right.
it's like, yeah, we all made a difference through our protests, through our actions, through our acting up. We made a difference.
Yeah, and before I just leave this page, you mentioned the anger, and that's one thing that Larry Kramer, I mean, he died last month, but that was one thing he hoped that would continue, is in the activism, that is anger, because you have to disrupt to get the attention, and we're seeing that now as well. Next slide, Ryan. So earlier we talked about the general cast, but Julia Roberts said of these two dynamic duos, they're an unlikely team, but a formidable one. Mm-hmm. And they were really mirror images of themselves. He reads the article in the New York Times, he goes right to her office. Mm-hmm. And, she's attempting to get grant money and to continue doing her research, but efforts are rejected by the government. He, on the other hand, is seeing this happen and trying to get his group from the gay men's health crisis to not only care on a social and healthcare level, but also to become aggressive and use tactics to get awareness from the people who needed to be shaken up. And the first scene they have together, one of the first scenes is when she says to him, who are you? I hear you shake things up. And he says, yeah, I have a big mouth. And she says, no, you don't. You have a cure. And right from there, they're going to take this on together. And she tells him, you don't need everyone's love and approval. So they really come together and make a difference. And just from the elements of acting and sharing the screen, they're very powerful, but they complement each other. They don't take away from, one out acting the other or taking away from the scene. It's very powerful, but yet very strong. And I love the scene in the middle there with, they're at dinner together. They put on Johnny Mathis, and she's supposed to, exercise. So they have a tender moment there where they just, I guess, take a break from their anger. It's really something to think that she actually was offered this role over that 30-year span 2 or 3 times. And she turned it down because she couldn't get into the character. It didn't click for her. She couldn't make a connection to this doctor in the wheelchair. But then she watched the documentary on polio, and her character was one of the last people to contract polio. And that's what draws her back to the movie, back to this character. And lo and behold, she, she has such a great performance in it. So good for her that she saw that documentary. Next slide, Ryan. And I think, Clay, you were talking about this a little bit before. You had the denial by the government, mm-hmm. by the medical and gay communities. And did you see that? Did you see within the city, that there were these conflicts arising between the members of the gay community and denials? Of course, Reagan didn't talk about it at all, but what were your perspectives on this?
In the early years, like I said, it was so confusing. And you know, one moment they're saying, oh, this is something that strikes Haitians, and then it was gays, and then it was like, I mean, one of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot is that there were literally doctors out there saying, oh, women can't get this even if their male partner has the virus. The misinformation was just stunning. And it, in some ways, it reminds me of what we're going through now with COVID-19. I mean, another virus, where people don't know. I mean, some of it is that they didn't know, but then it was like, then there was like malicious spreading of untruths, just as there is now. And a lot of the gay people that I knew, even when they started believing it, it was like, oh, this will happen to me. And they didn't want to give up the fun. In some ways, I mean, it was hard won. The marches, the discos, to being out, being loud and gay, and they didn't want to give that up for this image of a people struck by illness. And I mean, the truth was that we're so narrow in our focus that we weren't looking at the rest of the world and what was going on.
Right.
This is not a gay disease. It's devastated the world. More and more heterosexuals have been affected than gay men. But it began there. And so I think there came a point when gay people's attitudes did change. They became more and more aware of it much sooner than the general population. I mean, the general population was like, ooh, don't sit next to me.
Right.
You know, even when gay people at that point knew how it was spread and knew that sitting next to somebody wasn't going to do it.
Well, even in the beginning of the movie, it kind of struck me, and, you know, they briefly get into it, but, you know, the opening scene is Fire Island. You have sexual freedom, identity freedom, sexual revolution. And even, you know, you had Hugh Hefner and sexual, you know, openness going on across the country. But, you know, I remember listening to some of the discussion back and forth, like in the scenes we see now, and they're like, you know, we worked so hard to get this freedom, and then we're going to have to stop what we just got our freedom for. So it was really such confliction across the board. Next slide, Ryan. So that's where you see kind of what leads into that is their first meeting. You see Dr. Bruckner's there, and you have, you know, 30 or so guys. They show up at Larry Kramer's or Ned Week's apartment, and she's filling them in on these men who are dying, and she's seeing this disease that has never been seen before, and, you know, saying that it's a death sentence and you're going to spread it to each other, and it had to just cut into their heart. You know, at that time. And then, of course, wanting the right, you know, absolute information where they're still trying to gain the information, made it really, really tough. And when you hear, like you were saying, you had the moral majority, religious groups, and so on, we're just going to take, you know, see, we were right. They're terrible people, instead of saying there's a virus and we have to deal with that. It's not the people, it's just that's how it's transmitted. But it's a virus, it's not them per se. So that denial was really tough to watch, because we know where that was going to be leading. But as the doctor said, you know, it's a war, and you have to win it, you have to start one. A lovely scene, though, and he did this in the movie off and on, Ryan Murphy did, where you see there Felix and Ned, they're out by the pier, and you know, some nice music is being played, and they get to the end of the pier, and he gets down on one knee and he asks Felix to move in with him. And, you know, so you have that aspect of it too, which was nice to see as well, shown that, you know, we're in this chaos, but we also have this need to love and be loved as friends and as partners and so on. So that was really amazing to have those two things going on at the same time. Ryan, you can go to the next slide. So you now have a gay men's health crisis, and they're trying to deal with all this stuff. And something that jumped out at me was that there's no cell phones, there's no internet, there's no Twitter. It's really just calling each other. You see, even at the center, they're picking up the phone with the front desk. So it really had to be such a coordinated activist gathering, whether it was to help with the gay men's health crisis or any kind of activism that was going on. You know, and in the bottom there, that's a picture from the Gay Men's Health Center. And I heard this a lot with some of the guys I was talking to, that they are really grateful for the lesbians, that the women, as the men were getting ill, more and more people weren't there to help. But then, you know, the women kind of showed up for them, as you see even in the movie. Is that how it kind of transpired, Clay, from what you remember?
Yes, our friends were dying. Our friends were getting sick, and nobody was helping, and they were dying. So yes, we had to step up and help. And I think everybody did. This is a community. It was really amazing. And like I said, there was a lot of misinformation. The women in ACT UP ended up having their own caucus within it. And some of that came out of some doctor in Cosmo was literally printing lies. And women were becoming infected in great numbers because of the craziness out there. So there was a women's demonstration that shut down Cosmo for a while, Cosmopolitan magazine. But women were there and manning the phones at, womaning the phones at MHC, but also when ACT UP began, marching with them and just on the front lines.
You know, in these couple of scenes, and I think that the scene there with Mickey and with Tommy Boatwright, the large one where he's holding onto his neck, whoever may have seen the movie, and for me, that scene was just heart-wrenching, where he's with the health center in the city, and he's trying to figure out, where's this disease from? People are trying to ask him, and then, you know, over their heads is that they may be the ones who are murdering each other. And he has such a breakdown where he talks about going to the Empire State Building, he can jump off, and Tommy, played by Jim Parsons, goes up to him and just consoles him and says, "You are not a murderer, you are a hero." You know, and we just have a lot of bereavement overload, because as you can tell from the funeral scene up above, where people were going to funerals every week or every other week with friends, and no one wanted to help. And that scene when Boatwright is talking at a eulogy, he's like, "I keep screaming inside, why are they letting us die? Why is no one helping?" And then he says, "Because they just don't like us."
Yeah.
And it had to just, you know, wear you down, because am I causing this? And am I, you know, helping? So those scenes were very poignant, I thought, and really drove home. I was talking to a friend, and he was going every other week to a funeral for someone he knew or a friend of someone he knew during that time. So, you know, very, very tough. Next slide, Ryan. So another area in this film that not only got a lot of awards but also recognition was the sound, the cinematography, and the special effects. And you know, when you see the transformation of Felix from early on, walking around the New York Times, to when he's, you know, out begging Ned's brother to visit him and take care of their finances, to, you know, every time someone calls and says they died, that there's the Rolodex where he takes the name out of the Rolodex and puts it in the drawer because he didn't want to just throw that name away. And the scenes where you have Ned at the typewriter and he's typing and he's saying what's going on from what he's writing, I just thought that tempo and momentum really showed the urgency and the franticness that was in the air for them. So, and in the plane scene where Bruce has taken Albert to visit his mother, she agreed to see him as he was dying, and the plane's on the ground because the pilot doesn't want to fly with him on it, so he gets off. Then a new pilot comes on and he's hallucinating, and they're trying to calm it down. They get to the hospital where no one wants to even touch the guy after he dies, and they put him in a bag. I mean, did you hear stories like that, Clay, from people who were, you know, that you knew?
Early on, I heard a lot of stories like that, and I had been involved in this organization called the Gay Activist Alliance of Hudson County in New Jersey, and it was a very early group in New Jersey, and we met twice a week. Once on Wednesdays was our big meeting night where everybody would come, and we'd have usually something educational, and then a social time. And then we had a board meeting on Sundays at a friend's house who always made pasta, lots of pasta. But I lost 9 friends from that group, 9.
Wow. Oh my God.
And the, just the going to the funerals and hearing the stories about either not being able to visit them in the hospital or that they weren't getting proper treatment in the hospital. I will say this, that St. Vincent's became the place of angels. They became the hospital that took care of people, and they had an AIDS ward that opened up in the 80s, and I thank God that they existed and the people there did that work. They were right there in the villages, and I cried when St. Vincent closed. You know, I think it was in the 2000s that it closed, but because it had been the place that was really there for our community.
Yeah, and that's what even Larry Kramer said, that scene where you see them carrying the sick man around the streets, that was happening.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to why he was so angry,
Right.
almost at everyone, because at his brother who wouldn't, you know, just accept him, to
Right.
the doctors who wouldn't help him, to his community. And in fact, the scene where they're all at the Gay Men's Health Center there, and they sit him down and they start to read the letter that's going to remove him from the board, and that is actually the letter, word for word, that the board wrote and read to him in 1981 or whenever it was that it took place. And so when that was being read and he was, watching the movie, as old and frail as he was because he was sick at the time, it just broke his heart, because that is actually what they said to him.
Yeah.
And they did that was a really poignant scene and a really strong scene that actually the letter was accurate right down to every word that they read to him that time. you know, when they were getting rid of him there. So really amazing clips here. Next slide, Ryan. So it came off that year with 16 Emmy nominations and various awards. In total, I believe they had 55 various nominations from different groups over that year. And Matt Bomer, who plays Felix, won quite a few multiple awards. Larry Kramer won a Screenwriters Award. Julia Roberts won a Women's Image Award. And the sound, editing, hairstyle, those types of contributions also were recognized very well. So, you know, for all of the criticisms that it wasn't as strong as the play and so on and so forth, it did very well during Emmy time, and overall really was impactful for, you know, being 30 years later. Would you have anything else to add as far as the movie itself, Clay?
I thought it was an extremely well done movie, and both capturing those early years of confusion, but then as the GMHC, it's maturing, but like I said at the beginning, the capturing the emotions of the anger that Ned Weeks felt.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was masterful. The most poignant scene for me of all of it, though, was Jim Parsons' character Tommy, with his Rolodex, taking the cards out and gently wrapping them up and putting them in his drawer because he didn't want to throw away the people.
Yeah.
I lost it.
I
totally
loved his
lost it
character.
there.
Yeah. And even where he's so warm and so loving, and the way he cares for Mickey, who is really melting down, and it just is something. But then he has that scene as he's trying to get into the center when, you know, these guys are protesting, and he just wails off and hits the guy to get in, because I think, you know, even him was to that breaking point.
Right.
You know, so that was really incredible. Next slide. So in conclusion, you know, bringing it back to Larry Kramer, since this movie really is his autobiography, and he'll be the first one to tell you, and he's like, as a writer, and Clay, I know you're a writer as well, every writer has a story to tell, and he wanted to tell his story. Interesting enough, if you look at Larry Kramer's birthday was this past Thursday. He would have been 85. And if you look at this time of month, it's Gay Pride Month. And in New York, this week is Gay Pride Week. And it may be corny for me to say, but it's almost like he was even born during the time.
Wow, today would have been the March, in fact.
Yeah. And, you know, Larry wanted to be seen first as a writer. And that's how he understood himself. Now, up in the corner, you see Larry Kramer with his husband, David Webster. Now, going back to the book Faggots, when he's writing that scathing novel about the men and how terrible they were with their promiscuity, he was motivated to write it because that David Webster was the guy he fell in love with, who chose not to be with him because he wasn't ready to settle down. But lo and behold, they meet up again in the 90s, late 90s, and eventually fall back in love. And now they became married in 2013. So that's kind of a interesting twist from the novel he wrote that was such a scathing novel. You know, so interesting today too, being Gay Pride in New York. Andrew Cuomo actually, in talking about Pride Day, they had a virtual, and he came on the news and brought up Larry Kramer as someone who was a fighter and that we need to continue to fight. And that was nice to see as well.
That is nice. One of the things about this movie, though, in terms of Larry Kramer's life, in some way, this is a prologue. I mean, he went on to found ACT UP, and that organization did more to get AIDS recognition, AIDS funding, AIDS research than any other organization in history. And like I said, this is just the Normal Heart is the beginning. He went on to, I think, maybe writing was how he thought of himself first, but I guess I think of him as the activist who made all that change possible, fueled by his anger and need to do something. The slogan, silence equals death. I mean, they didn't have cell phones back then or the internet, but it was spray painted on every sidewalk and every wall, and it was on every t-shirt. There wasn't a person I knew, gay or straight, that didn't have a t-shirt that said that.
That's right. And let me just share with you and the rest of the folks listening. Here's a quote from someone who's been in the news for the last few months. When I met with Larry Kramer, what struck me was his sadness, the sadness of someone whose anger is rooted in love. Dr. Anthony Fauci told this to the New York Times. Once you got past the rhetoric, you found that Larry Kramer made a lot of sense and that he had a heart of gold. And it kind of gets what you were saying, that they created these medications. They pushed the NIH who didn't want to be pushed. You know? So,
yeah, in 1987, October of that year, was a March on Washington, and ACT UP was the voice. Larry Kramer was the voice of that march. I was there that day, and there were 750,000 of us. It was so crowded that there was not actually a march. It's a misnomer because you couldn't move. Basically, we all stood in place and yelled and screamed our heads off. But it was so effective. And he spoke at the rally, and that's when real change began. The NIH began to do funding, and it made a huge difference. And at that march, it was the first time that I ever saw the AIDS Memorial Quilt. It was already huge, and they had it laid out, and you could walk around it. It was laid out almost like it had streets through it, paths through it, so that you could walk around. And the person I was there with that day, she saw a patch that had been made for a coworker of hers that she had no idea, and it was just, devastating to her. Somebody that she had worked with when she was a younger attorney had succumbed to this disease, and it was such an emotional moment that everybody there was silent. Like I said, there were so many people you couldn't move, and we walked very slowly around this quilt, and there was no noise at all for those seats.
Too, even getting to Dr. Bruckner, who was such an interesting character, and he really spoke so highly of her.
Yeah.
But in the movie, she's portrayed as Jewish. In reality, she was German, but she stayed closeted German because she said back then being Jewish in medicine helped. And, you just told this story about your friend who's with you and she saw this person. It was like the layers of people having to navigate what they thought would bring the best outcome. Everyone was not living their true self, whereas he really was. And our friend in California, I was talking to him about Larry Kramer, and he's a bit younger than Larry Kramer, but he said that they heard him saying these things about you got to take a pause on your sexual activity, we're spreading it, and people were really angry with him. But he said slowly we all got to understand that he was absolutely right And as Mickey said during this movie, and people said later, that's also was terrifying that he actually was right.
Yeah.
So here we are today.
Yeah.
Any final last words about the movie, your experience, what you observed with your friends?
I really appreciated watching this movie, and
Mhm.
I recently saw a little video that a friend of mine put together about his life. It was his birthday present to himself, just this little video of his life. And I'm watching it, and I thought it was very cute. And he was somebody that I knew back in the Gay Activist Alliance. So we've known each other a very long time. So I'm watching it, and then there came a point when he had all the faces of the mutual friends we had lost to AIDS. I wasn't expecting that to be there. And it broke my heart. But he's
Yeah.
right. It was part of a really critical part of his life and of mine. And I'm grateful that there were people like Larry Kramer who spoke up and made the rest of us speak up as well and do something.
And now 30 years was 2014, and here we
Right.
are in 2020.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that this gets a whole new look-see, because like Ryan Murphy, and this is my last comment, that we don't forget,
Right.
and that we don't repeat it, and
Yeah.
that we learn and become better at, you know, funneling our anger in ways that will make change in a positive way.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, if you have any words to share, if anyone who's listening has any comments, would love to hear from them.
No, we didn't get anything in the chat, and honestly, I finally watched this last week. My wife has wanted me to watch this for a long time. She absolutely loved this movie, and so preparing for this, I watched it, and you covered everything. You covered everything I could have possibly wanted to know about this, and I thank Dr. Gish for spending your time and sharing your knowledge with us. I cannot thank you enough. And Kathy, as always, you are so dedicated to all this, and we can't thank you enough for what you've done to help make sure that we're able to get this out through ArtsQuest channels. This incredibly important information, this incredibly, you're right. Just to make sure people see it again, just a reminder of, obviously I was aware of this from having worked at Civic Theater of Allentown, where they had put on a production of Normal Heart, and I'd done so I knew about the backstory, but it was very interesting to see that get put into the movie, and you covered absolutely everything I could have possibly asked about. So thank you both so much. So what I'm going to do is real quickly, I just want to unmute the mics. I know there's only a couple people here, but I just want to give a big round of applause to Kathy and Dr. Gish. So the three of us who are going to be clapping, clap real loud. That is happening in 3, 2, 1. All right. All right. Well, they definitely clapped loud, and I thank them so much. All right. So just to wrap real quick, again, a huge thank you to Dr. Clay Gish for coming on and sharing her expertise with us through this. She is down in Key West, and she took some time away from being in Key West to do this, which tells you how important this is to her, and we can't thank her enough for her time. And Kathy Ford, as always, a cinema committee member who has donated so much time and talent to ArtsQuest, and we thank her for being a part of this also. Thank you to BSI Corporate Events for sponsoring this ArtsQuest at Home presentation. Go to artsquest.org/at-home for everything we've got coming up. This week, tomorrow, we've got a Pixar panel and so much other stuff, from Friends trivia to salsa dancing, all there at artsquest.org/at-home. And we'll also soon have information on when our movie theaters will open up, as we're still working out that situation now that we are in the green phase, but we want to do so as responsibly as absolutely possible to ensure as much safety as possible. So again, thank you all for being here. Have a great night. Please stay safe, stay strong through all this, and we can't wait to see you again soon. Good night.